chief exec of United. When we look at Newark and its problems, and therefore other airports in the US with problems, what's needed to fix it?
Well, there are parts of the world that are going to be really challenging to operate. You know, at United, what we've done is we're flying a smaller schedule than we did in 2019 to try to create some relief. And for the most part, the operation is running well. The one area where we really have challenges is the New York airspace, Newark in particular. And from an industry perspective in the United States, New York, Newark, and Florida really are air traffic control challenges. There's different issues at some other airlines, but those two places are really struggling.
Realistically, there's not much that can be done to improve the situation between now and the summer. It's hold your nose and.
I disagree. Although it requires, you know, the truth is I think it requires government help. Because the biggest issue is there's more flights scheduled in Newark, for example, than there is capacity at the airport, even in a perfect blue sky day. And air traffic control is understaffed, and because of that, like, there's just more flights than the airport can handle.
What do you want from government?
Well, what we really want at Newark Airport in particular is to enforce the rules that limit the amount of flights to the number of operations that the airport can theoretically handle. But the other thing we need, and they're not the only ones, there's a lot for airlines to do, but the other thing we need is to get the air traffic control towers back to full staffing.
Are you frustrated because you've managed to keep from facing an existential crisis and being ready to build up and rebuilding up and crewing up again? Does this frustrate you?
You know, I don't think frustration is the right word because I understand it's happening all across the economy. What I don't like is at United, we prepared for this. 2 years ago, we started preparing the Build Back Plan, knowing it would be difficult and trying to, for the most part, covering all the things that were within our control. And, you know, we got deals done with our pilots. We don't have staffing issues. You know, we prepared for those things. And so some of these other things, you know, and we made such a difference on what was happening to customers and had the experience for customers and the improvement. And so I'm frustrated that the customer experience is backsliding for things that are a lot of times outside of our control. The pandemic set up what I think is going to be some seismic shifts in the U.S. airline industry. And people haven't quite figured it out yet, but when you look back, when I talk to you 2 years from now at the AGM, I think you're going to look back and say, wow, things really, the things that we took for granted in the airline industry are totally different than they were before the pandemic.
All right. You can't use words like seismic shift and not give me...
Tell me what they are.
And not tell me what they are.
I was hoping you would ask.
Yeah. Well, what are those seismic shifts?
So first, I think United Airlines is going to be the biggest and the best airline in the world. We're just positioned uniquely. Our team is doing a great job. The second thing that I think is, from an industry perspective, maybe the biggest, is there is a real pilot shortage. And regional airlines and low-cost airlines are going to very much struggle to hire enough pilots. And so going through that process, and other airlines are at earlier stages of the 7 stages of the acceptance process, going through the grief. But you know, that is going to be a seismic shift in the industry because people aren't going to be able to realize their growth aspirations. Not everyone is going to be able to realize their growth aspirations.
And what's the one thing that could screw it all up? What's the one thing that you worry about now? Well, that all you're planning and you think, well, if that happens, I don't know.
You know, I'm not the worrying type.
You're really not?
I'm not. Well, the reason I'm not the worrying type is because if there's something that you know about, then go deal with it. And then you don't have to worry about it. And if you can't change it, then there's no point in worrying about it. But the most likely things, I think, to tip the industry off the current recovery track is some exogenous shock. It could be, I used to say war. That's now happened. You know, pandemic. Ironically, in 2019 at our board meeting, they asked, you know, what are the 2 things that, you know, same kind of question, and I said, a pandemic or a war. And now both of those things happen, but you can't plan for those kinds of events. So some kind of exogenous shock is the biggest. What we as the whole industry need to do, however, and we need the help of our governments, is get the system back to running normally, because you know, this is really frustrating for customers and unfairly frustrating for customers. And so our focus in the next few years needs in months and years is to build a resilient system that can handle these increases in demand, that has some margin of error. Airlines can't do that alone. In fact, we almost need the governments more than we need ourselves to help. But we need the help to rebuild a resilient system to support this industry.